talk to these players a lot about a 4 count or a beat that you're playing this game at. It's just a 4-4 beat. And if you've got that ball in your hands longer than 2 seconds, you're holding up your team. Our belief is that this offense begins immediately when you get the basketball in your hands. Everybody has a programmed route that they can run, and anybody can take that person's place. And as they go up the court, they fill out the court in a certain manner that allows this offense to format itself and then to attack.
Hello, I'm Tex Winter, head basketball coach at Kansas State University. You know, the team that's well conditioned and well drilled in the fundamentals of the game, such as passing, dribbling, shooting, footwork, and running, is a mean opponent. I'd like to share with you.
I'm going to stop Ted right there because I feel like he covered exactly what needed to be said about photography, and that you need to focus on the fundamentals first before you actually get the advanced concepts. In the triangle offense, a lot of advanced concept relies upon the fundamentals, being the ability to pass, shoot, score, and primarily spacing and the relationship between those elements. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the photography triangle. I'm talking about the 3 main elements of photography that have to all work together to capture light. Because if you define photography, its origins come from the word photo, which is Greek for the word light, and then graphia, which is the field or study. So in the most important sense, photography is just capturing light. And this triangle is extremely important to understanding everything else about photography. Because if there's no light, you can't make a photograph. Even if there's a tiny bit of light, the camera and the 3 elements can work with that and use that to create an image. I'm going to pause the clip right there because I want to include a conversation or analysis from Phil Jackson, one of the most popular proponents of the triangle offense, coaching Michael Jordan, coaching Kobe Bryant, coaching Carmelo. And in his success with the triangle, he was able to break down and analyze his own offensive scheme in such a way that it best applies to a photographer and how they should view the relationship between the 3 elements of photography.
The triangle offense is set so that there's a key pass that creates motion. And then there's...
Now, let's stop the clip right there. In a basketball sense, the triangle offense was an extremely cerebral look at the game. You understood that there are 3 players in the primary action. There still are 2 others on the left side. Regardless of that, the defense will give each other's player a certain amount of space. And depending on that ratio of defense, that number and that amount of space the player gives up is exploited and utilized in the offense. You give one player too much space to double team or fake a double team, then in theory, the player should know exactly who to pass to and at what time for them to be completely wide open at full fault of the defense. In a photography aspect, the main 3 elements are all controlling light. Light isn't the enemy per se, but it is the element. ISO, shutter speed, and aperture is something we're going to analyze, and that's what is required to make a photograph.
And there's 33 different types of options that come out of that single pass.
All 3 elements control light. In this metaphor, we're going to use the 1990 Bulls as the example of Dennis Rodman, Michael Jordan, and Scottie Pippen. Strange order, but Dennis Rodman is ISO in this situation. Known for his ability to rebound and tenacity on the boards and on defensive end, he wasn't known as a scorer. But at only 6'7", he was a league-leading rebounder for almost a decade-long period, as well as ability to pass was above average for a big man. In the triangle offense, he was critical for doing all the things that didn't count on the stat sheets, outside of rebounding. And ISO in that regard, or ASA if you're shooting actual film photography, does all the little things of the triangle. They all control light, but ISO is the most limited. If you buy a film camera and you buy a roll of film, you're locked into the 100, 200, 400, 1600 ISO. There's a common measurements of it, of sensitivity of light for all of your exposures in your camera. And when I'm taking a photograph, ISO is the one I'm going to change the least often. And the counter side of that, and the drawback of ISO, is that it can produce a lot of grain. Now, if Dennis Rodman is ISO, and that leaves Scottie Pippen as shutter speed. Shutter speed determines the length of time that the sensor will be exposed to light. And as for one of the primary distributors for the team, Dennis Rodman, well 6'7" as well, and known traditionally as a point guard, controlled the flow of the game with his ability to handle the ball, play make, and pass. So, much like his control of the game, shutter speed also controls motion in a photograph alongside of light. A high shutter speed will allow you to stop a car driving by in an instant. It'll stop a helicopter blade. It'll stop a hummingbird flapping its wings. While a slow shutter speed will allow for more movement to happen. If you're taking photographs of someone doing a race, then you're going to use a slow shutter speed to allow them to see their movements of their arms, allow them to see the more human elements. Or you're taking a photograph of a river. To smooth out the water of the flowing of the river, then you need a low shutter speed. Typically, if you're hand holding a camera, a digital camera, you're going to shoot 1/60th of a second. It's displayed as ratios. Anything below that, you tend to get a little bit more movement blur from the actual camera itself than most people prefer, which is why people use tripods as well as monopods and bipods. But in that way, Scottie Pippen is still, in this example, shutter speed. He gets the job done, and he controls the game with his ability to control the ball. Simple as that. Great player, does a great job. Focus is a fitting description for Michael Jordan, as well as it is a fitting description for the word aperture. Now, aperture is the ratio or size of the lens when a photograph is taken. Aperture, if you're looking at this camera, is the hole at the very little circle in between this lens. It can be extremely big, extremely wide open. That's for an expensive camera will get you that. Or it could be extremely small, extremely tiny. And they have differing effects. Obviously, big hole, you're going to allow more light to get in, but also you're going to have a smaller plane of focus. So if you're taking a photograph of a model in the face, with the biggest exposure you can get, you're probably going to be able to only expose the top of someone's nose while leaving their eyes out of focus with that blurry effect in the background. Meanwhile, if you have a very tiny aperture, 16, f16, f30, f64, it's what's referred to as f-stops, you're going to be able to take a photograph of, let's say you're at a basketball game, you're taking a photograph of a crowd and the court, you're going to be able to get every single player and every single fan in focus as long as you have enough light to get an f64 exposure. So now you know all three elements of photography. You know what they control, their strengths and weaknesses, and you also know that they all control light. Now, the most important thing is understanding the relationship between all three of them. Because if you change any part of the triangle by just one increment, one f-stop for aperture, one interval or increased ratio by one stop is the official term for shutter speed and ISO, then you have to either counterbalance that with an equal and opposite change with another one of the three, or accept the difference as that would change the entire amount of light that's entering the photograph. So understanding that relationship could take a lifetime of practice and patience and fundamentals, but first you got to start with the fundamentals for you to nail the shot every single time.